Singing, loving, grinding, creating more good and living, thinking, healing, loving, loving, doing, writing, while black.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Writing While Black. I am Angela, your co host, and we're joined by your other co host, author Ayoka B. Yay! And our topic today is literacy. So, I'm going to start off by taking a trip down memory lane. I want you to think about what reading meant to you, what being able to read, go to the library, bury yourself in a book meant to you as a young person when you first started developing your love of reading and how that developed. But I want to start off by checking in writer to writer and seeing what's up, what's new and good, what you working on, what you writing,
Okay.
reading, what you watching.
Reading Show You No Mercy by Kate Powell because we'll be interviewing her soon within the next couple of days. So I'm reading that. I just got finished reading something by JD. She's an indie author. 40 Hours with a Stranger is the first one, and the second one is They're Not Strangers. Those are romance, short reads, quick reads. Shout out to indie authors. She's a black female. So that's what I'm reading. And next up will be an indigenous read. Indigenous peoples of the place that we now call America. I want to be specific because they're indigenous peoples in a lot of different lands. Yes. I'm leading an event Sunday. It's called Your First Love, A Journey to Self. So it's self-love check-in is what I'm calling it for women. Intimate gathering inspired by Love at Second Sight, the journey about our FMC Shane. And it's at the end of the day, it's about her self-love journey. So that'll be fun. I'm hosting. I'm excited about that and talk to the ladies and get us to focus on stuff. I'm writing Mike's story. I did work a little bit and do some promos as well for Bluff because that's the one I'll be going back to after that. And that is a paranormal YA novel based here in Costa Rica. So that's going to be fun because that's very different for me.
I just downloaded on Everand Show You No Mercy, and
Okay.
I looked for it in my library, Libby, and they said notify me. So I did a notify me because maybe it'll help an independent author out. I don't know.
Right. You know
So I
what?
did.
Now that I think, I don't mean to cut you off, but a lot of times when I look in Libby for indie authors, it won't have it, and I don't think to do notify me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they get a ping to say, oh, people are asking about this. So thank you for saying that. Go ahead.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I'm currently listening to One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon, and I'm also listening to Miseducation of the Negro. And then I got
Oh,
on
you're taking it
NetGalley.
back.
I'm taking it
You're
back
taking it back. Okay.
since I was in college, and
Okay.
I listened to it's only 5 hours, but I listened to about 2 or 3 hours, and then I took it back to the beginning because it's a lot to process. What I remember from when I read it initially and now, like, I just feel like there's so many layers of things going on and I have so many thoughts, and I'm usually listening
I
while
need to
I'm
go
washing
back and read
dishes,
it.
but I
need
feel
to
like
go
I
back
need to
and
be
read it.
taking notes. Yeah.
It's been a very long time since I read that book. I don't know, but I'm sure that the way I receive it will probably be different than how it was back then. Because I think back when I read it, that was super hyper militant, angry Ayoka. So I'm wondering if it'll hit the same or differently or what. We already talking about literacy. I love that we talked about what we're reading. That's a big one that people need to read.
Yeah, and I'm also reading an advanced copy. Yeah, Heinzelman's The Divorce Attente. So I'm 70% into that.
You one of those people that can read multiple books at a time. See, I can't do it. My brain Don't, mm-mm, doesn't like it.
I have other stuff that I'm reading. I downloaded a bunch of a bunch of books on a free book event, and I just finished Hearts Acquired. So I'm probably going to start reading one of those others that I downloaded.
But
So that's mostly what I'm reading now. I'm watching the Korean drama. I didn't do any editing this week on Love Soiree, but I did start working on the layout for Our Freedom, continuing cover design work. That's what's going on. I travel in a minute, so I feel kind of like in limbo. That's what I got going on. Let's jump into our memories of reading.
okay.
When
Okay.
you first fell in love with books and reading and libraries.
Yeah, my mom, and this is something that I want to talk about further as we get into the episode, the importance of parents reading to children.
Hmm.
Um, that was where I got my love of reading. She started reading to me probably before I could remember. But I can remember cuddled with her reading at 3, 4, 5 years old. I was an early reader, and I think that's because she started reading early to me. And we would read, and I can remember she would change voices and be all dramatic and stuff, and I loved it. I loved it. And that is when I first started loving books. And then we would go to the library a lot. She would let me pick out the books, and I'd go to the counter with my little stack of books, and I had my library card, and it was all very exciting. That's how it starts with parents reading. But even with the library, kids, and you let them pick out their own books and get their library card, and even just going through the process of a child getting a library card. I can remember when I did it with my children. I can't remember as clearly with Nadia because that was so long ago, but I can remember I can remember it clearly with Diallo. And he was so excited. I have a little picture of him when he got his library card. He's 4 and he's holding up his first book. I posted that picture on my IG before, about the importance of libraries and reading and that sort of thing. And then I can remember from there at my school. I went to a fancy school, so the library was sick. You know what I mean? Library was one of the classes. I remember we used to call her Mrs. Sid. I used to love her, and we would huddle around, sitting legs crisscross, pretzel style, and listen to her reading, and we would be transported. We would be in another world listening. They must teach this in librarian school. She would be holding the book and turning the pages, and her eyes would get all big and fabulous. I loved it. That's seared on my brain. Those are my memories.
I don't remember reading to me at all, but I do remember that there were always books around. And when I was in school, I would have a book like inside of my math book. Whatever book I was reading, I would have, and I would be reading it. I would walk down the street reading because I wanted to know what was going to happen, and I was so invested. I remember how exciting it was going to the library. We had a library in our
Disclaimer at the bottom. This is do not try at home.
what reading while you walk.
Why you reading walking down the street? My God.
Just so absorbed in it. And we had a library in our community because I grew up in a place called Highland Park, which is a city within the city of Detroit. So we had the McGregor Public Library, and I used to go there. And there was also the Detroit Public Library, and the main branch had a children's library, and it was full of books, and it was so exciting and so abundant and so rich. And then in our neighborhood, did you have this? We had a pool mobile that would come occasionally, but we had a bookmobile that would come occasionally.
We did not. I've seen that DC Public Library, they're doing things like that now, but we didn't have that back then. Or let me say this, we didn't have that in my neighborhood back then.
Right.
I don't know if they had it or not, but we used to go to, I don't remember us going to our neighborhood library as much. We used to go down to the main library, which is Martin Luther King Library in DC, and they had a huge children's department, which they still have. It's been updated. They did a total renovation of the building. I remember going to the main ones, but we didn't have a bookmobile.
It was the bomb. I mean, it was as exciting as the pool mobile or when someone would open the hydrant. All of those
Okay,
were like
wait,
highlights.
pause. What? How a pool mobile? How can that work? Like what?
Girl, I don't know how it worked, but it would come into the neighborhood and it would be this truck that was a pool. It had water in it and we could get in it and play. I don't know how it works.
I, that's what I envisioned when you said pool mobile, but I'm like, how is that? What is the engineering?
That was exciting. The hydrant was exciting, and the bookmobile was exciting. And going to the library was just always so much fun. I have a little cousin. I used to read to. I remember when she said, "I can read it myself." I was so upset because I just felt so grown being able to read to her. Like I had the key. I had the secret.
Live. Let her
Choice. She like I can
experience
read
her
it
literacy
myself.
journey.
Right. I remember how warm and exciting it was for me to be able to share a book with her in that way. I went to Catholic school. In my public school, we did have library as a class. But in private school, I don't remember the library, but I remember one of my favorite teachers, Mrs. Canfield, who would call us cookies and would let us eat in class. Everything but boiled eggs. You couldn't eat boiled eggs in class, but you could eat in her class, and that was just like. But
That's
she
pretty
had
good.
a library, and she would
Okay.
talk about books, and she was so excited about words and language, and her class was so like energized.
What class was it?
I was in the sixth grade, so it was like English
English?
literature.
Okay.
And
Okay.
she had a system where she would like just go through her row and she'd be like, okay, Ayoka B, and she'd ask the question. And if you got the question right, you get 100%. If you got it wrong, you get a 0. But if you got a 0, then anybody in the class could raise their hand and answer. And so we'd be like, oh, Miss Camp. But she just
Got
read
a zero?
you got either you knew it or you didn't. So she had a bunch of grades for us. Like for our participation, it would be like 100% or 0, 100% or 0. So when your time came, you better know, or else your grade was in danger. She was so excited about words and books, and she even ran the choir. So it wasn't just the written word, but it was like words and communication in general.
Another thing I remember is the book fairs. We would do
Yeah.
book fairs at school. And I don't really want to, it was Scholastic Book Fair. I'm mad at them because they be banning books. They be following the book bans, and that's some bull. But anyway, I can remember that. That is a strong memory. Being excited, come home with that little booklet and sit down with my mother, and I would go through which ones I was going to buy, and I was very excited, and I always wanted more than she could probably afford. So she wouldn't say that, but she was like, okay, let's narrow it down, you know.
Let's get the top 3. What are the
Right.
top 3?
Right. Right. Because I could probably get at least some of them from the library.
Vague memory of those. Yapo and I were just talking about it like a week or 2 weeks ago about how exciting it was for him to get the list and pick the books. And I vaguely remember it, but it wasn't
Yes, that
high
was
up.
exciting.
Hmm.
I was and am a nerd, so I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. Not only was I oriented to stories and books, but I also watched a lot of TV as a child.
I feel like when we watch TV, we watch it together. Like the nighttime, I had an early bedtime. Yeah, different strokes and facts of life. Later on, it was Family Matters. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. We did watch the Jeffersons and Good Times, but I don't remember if that was in rerun by then or whether it
Right.
was in the episodes. Yeah, TV was a family event. When I was little, my aunt and my cousin lived with us. My aunt is my mother's only sister out of 9 kids, so they were really tight. Me and her daughter are a year apart. They lived with us for a long time. That was our family structure. We would be sitting down to watch our little shows. Well, the ones that we could watch. Of course, after we went to bed, they watched their own Dallas and all that kind of
Right. Is that who
drama.
killed JR? What was that show?
Yeah, that was
Dallas?
Dallas. That was Dallas.
Don't nobody care. But it was such a big deal at that time.
You don't let my aunt hear you say that. Oh my goodness, Dallas was her show.
As a family, we would go to plays as well and movies, as also stories that I grew up engaging in. As a child, it seemed like every year for about 3 or 4 years, Colored Girls came to Detroit and we would go see it. And I was so devastated by the scene where the child gets held out the window. I thought that play was just so important and so deep. When I went to college and I realized, oh, Intishaka Shenge and I went to the same school, and it's actually a choreo poem, like a book. I remember reading it with a different perspective and understanding a little more of the fullness of it. That was well before it became a movie. Plays Mama, I Want to Sing, the Chitlin Circuit, all of
Oh, Mama, oh, I
I
want
Want
to
to
sing.
Sing.
I love that. We saw
Yeah.
that. I remember that clearly.
Arms Too Short to Box with God. So I've always enjoyed stories. Now I live in a place where I'm like, where is the library? The Libreria is a copy shop with a few books. I'm
Yeah,
like,
you have to
where?
go. Well, you have to go to Limon.
To Limon. And I've seen it passing, but I've never been to it. As a child, I've had so much free access. I could walk to the library on my own. So I'm curious and worried or thoughtful about the experience of young people growing up without a library and how that impacts their love
Yeah,
of books, love of stories. Love.
I agree because I think, especially, I don't know if library is like part of the schedule now in elementary school like it was for us. Let's say you have a parent who literacy challenged. They can read, but maybe they don't read with proficiency, or maybe they feel embarrassed by their level of reading, so they don't read to their child. Maybe it's always been a source of embarrassment for them. And so when if that is an issue, that's when the library becomes so important, and school having a library becomes so important. We know that a lot of our schools are underfunded. So things like libraries, are one of the first things that get cut and don't get budget, or don't get it every year, let's say. So there may be a library, but it doesn't it doesn't get new books often. Or don't get started about computers and stuff like that. When I became a parent and my daughter went to started elementary school, I remember taking her to school. She went to our zone school, right? It was right down the street. I walked her there. It was so eye-opening going into that school and what that school was like compared to what my elementary school was like. I remember talking to my mother. When I walked into that school, I said I was expecting something that was similar to my elementary school. And my mother kind of laughed and was like, well, no. You're looking at public versus private. You're looking at a school in our neighborhood versus a school in a highly funded neighborhood. Visually, it didn't feel like an elementary school should. I was going to be that parent that was super involved in school anyways, but that just made me, in terms of fundraising, in terms of getting people to donate books to the library, in terms of, now when you got to the classrooms, it was different because teachers, they'll use money out of their pockets in a minute because they want their classroom to feel a certain way for their students. They want it to be happy and bright and cheerful and all of the things to get the kids excited. But yeah, I can remember that difference. And that is what I've seen as I've gone in different schools for different reasons back in the States, the disparities. My daughter later went to charter schools for middle and high school. Even between a charter school and a public school was a big difference because charter schools have private funders. And so I can remember like, this is not okay. And being very involved in the neighborhood association, and they had an education committee, being very involved in that and how to raise funds for our schools and libraries and that sort of thing. That's what it takes. That's what is required. It's going to take the community to demand more and also be very active and creative in ways to get what our children need and deserve.
Literacy, politics, critical thinking, there is a lot of overlap. When you were talking, it made me think about my mom when she was bused from her middle class neighborhood. The way I remember the story is she felt like she was in a great school and she got bused to the white school and was shocked at the difference. There were swimming pools, the science labs were totally different. It was a whole different experience. Sometimes what I encounter is not embarrassment and not being comfortable reading, and it's I don't like reading. I don't like books. When I worked with adolescents, we would read aloud together so that they could hear me reading and how I was interacting with the text, and so that they could each have a turn to interact with the text in that way and develop mentally to build confidence and build a love of reading, not just with little ones, in general, like that love of words and that engagement with them and the power of them. Some of us like rap, we like the lyricism, we like music, we're into words. There's always something. Saying I don't like reading is almost to me like saying I don't like eating. Maybe the food you eating is nasty or it's not to your taste, but there's something for everybody to read.
Right, because my mother is raising two of my young cousins right now. Samir is 13 and she's struggling with getting him to read. I don't feel like it, I don't want to. But I said, well, we gotta find out what he likes to read. And so I gave her, I told her to try Jason Reynolds, Black Man. He has some great books. He does elementary, but most of his are YA. One of my favorite books, 24 Seconds From Now, is a YA novel by him. It is super cute. It's a first love kind of story. But I agree. It's finding books that we enjoy. But I want to go back to something you said. I think with our children and even adults who may not like to read, just connecting the dots that it's not just about reading a book, it's also the songs that you love. It's also a play. It's stories. Think about it as stories that you enjoy. This is another reason why some of us need to stop talking about audiobooks with a negative connotation for many reasons. But audiobooks are a way that people who may not be an avid reader or even a strong reader of a physical book can interact with the text. And when you think about people, we all learn differently. It may be some people who don't like reading because that is not the way they best learn or receive information. Listening to it may open up a whole love of reading that they didn't even know they had. There are kids' books on audio now. That's accessible. You can get them through Libby from your local library or whatever that connect with your local libraries. When we talk about access, when we talk about not a library being in your community, that you can go to. Audiobooks can really bridge that gap right there.
I've been thinking about audiobooks a little bit because I do a lot of my reading digitally, and I want to figure out ways to get off of screens to have less screen time. I decided to add that in more aggressively and more positively because of wanting to have less screen time. Also, as African people, as African descendant people, there is a tradition of literacy and writing on the continent, and there's also a strong oral tradition. A strong oral tradition. That's important, to honor different people's modalities, different people's ways of accessing information and learning, and also some aspect of who we are. There's a filmmaker, Usman Simbene. He did the film Black Girl. I remember hearing him talk about, he was a writer first, the importance of his people. If I'm creating works that my people can't access, then what am I doing? I think that that's why he shifted to filmmaking, in order to get certain stories out in a way that could impact the growth and development of his people. So appreciate and respect it and think it's important. In the same way that there's a hierarchy, literary fiction, and then that's just genre fiction over there. Or this is reading, this is the way you access stories, films or other stuff is over there. It's important that we tell stories and receive stories. However, we need to tell and receive stories.
Can't remember who it was, a content creator on IG. I think it was originally on TikTok, but I saw it on IG. Stitch. The beginning of her post was a white woman saying, let's not normalize reading 20 books in a month. Basically, people overreading or whatever. And she was like, how about we talk about the fact that people are reading and that they're literate, because literacy is a real thing. More specifically, illiteracy is a real thing in the United States. How about we be happy that people are reading? Like, are you kidding me right now?
How about let's not normalize getting in other people's business. Let's normalize minding your own business. Like, if somebody want to read 50 books
Yeah, okay. But something you said triggered that. Let people read how they read. Same with audiobooks. If audiobooks fill somebody's soul, mind your business. Go read how you want to go read. Like, are you serious? I'm trying to incorporate more audiobooks into my reading. That has not been a practice. Usually it was a handful of audiobooks, like memoirs. But I want to get more into listening to. So now when I'll go on Libby, if it has an audiobook, I'll be like, okay, just pick it. I can't lie, I love a physical book. This act of turning pages does something to me. But as you said earlier, we don't have a library we can just go to. Buying and getting books shipped here is a whole thing. Not that we can't do it, but it's a process, and I'm impatient when it comes to books. I want to read it now. I don't want to wait. So I've gotten into the ebooks a lot, and David's been talking about my eyes always on books, which I know is a thing because I'm always reading. I need to take a cue from you and get more into some audiobooks because my eyes, I'm writing, so of course I'm on the screen and I don't need my eyes to get any worse.
Talking about transitioning from physical books to ebooks, I always had a book and I would travel with books. And I read Ursula K. Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness because I was in India. I finished my book. The little hostel I was at had a thing where you leave a book if you can pick up a book. I looked at all of the books and I couldn't find anything, but I had to have a book because I had to have a book.
Right.
And I got that book. Probably the first half, the first third, I was just like, this is the worst book ever. But then I got into it. If I hadn't been traveling, I would have never read that book. I would have never picked it up and I would have never finished it. But it's still like a memorable book. And I don't like to say the name of an author that's not black. So the fact that that name even came out of my mouth, I was really touched by that book. But so I always had a book. And I remember my mother, I think for her 50th birthday or 60th birthday, she wanted a Kindle. Oprah had it on her favorite things, the Kindle book reader, before it was a thing.
Right.
And my mother really, really wanted one, and she gets what she wanted. I remember when I first saw it, it was so thin, and she had like 40 or 50 books on there, and my mind was boggled because the profile and the weight and the bulk of it is nothing. We know that now, but at the time, I was so like, I have to have books. I came with a stack of books that I was lugging around, and she just had this little, it was amazing. It took me still a while to wrap my mind around it. Wow. You could have 1 million books in there. I had heard of it, but seeing it was wow.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I didn't have any mail and I wanted mail. So she would give me like the junk mail, like the sweepstakes, and I would like open it and engage with it and all of this stuff. And I ended up signing up for the Book of the Month Club and getting in trouble because the book came and I didn't send it back. I had this plan where I going to try to get the books and read them and then send them back in time so that I didn't have to pay for them, because my mother's like, you can't sign up. You have to pay for those books. It's not a library. You have to. But I signed up for it, and it was like some kind of mess or drama, a traumatic memory around the Book of the Month Club. That's probably why I can't unlock the details, because of the trauma. But there's something exciting about a new book.
One thing that I want to make sure I talk about in this episode is this threat of cuts of funding to the library system in the United States. IMLS, which is the Institute of Museum and Library Services, they receive the federal funding, which then goes out to all of the libraries across the U.S. An executive order in March was signed to eliminate this funding. Whatever, I'm not even going to get into that. The American Library Association filed a lawsuit which did a temporary restraining order on that, and also stopped this massive layoff of IMLS employees. What you can do as a reader, as a community member, as an individual, is use your libraries as much as possible, not only checking out books, but also all of the programming and resources that our libraries provide that sometimes we take for granted. All of this stuff that our library has to offer, sometimes we only think of it as books, but there are a lot of resources and programming there to help a lot of different subsets in the population. Also, if you have the means, you can donate to libraries. Contact your representatives to tell them hands off the IMLS. I wanted to make sure I got that out. Another thing I want to talk about is, the banned books roster continues to grow. And of course, there are voices. There are voices of underserved populations, marginalized populations, whether it's queer folks, whether it's brown folks, whether it's indigenous folks, whether it's just people who are real loud about saying stuff that's unpopular. So I want to encourage people to read banned books. If there's something that they don't want you to read, you should read it to see why they don't want you to read it. You can get banned books in libraries. Independent bookstores carry banned books. They usually have a whole banned book section. Even if it's just to see, what about this book don't they want us to know? Because when you attack libraries, that's how people learn and grow. If you weren't already conscious, you should understand that if somebody is taking away books, what that means. Why would someone do that? And And for our community specifically, it wasn't long ago that they didn't want us to be able to read anything. This is more speaking to people who say, I don't like books. I don't like reading. Young people especially. Books are freedom. Books are how you learn. Books are how you empathize. Books unlock the world to you. We need to be reading and consuming as much information as possible. It doesn't matter what you read, just make sure you do it. And find what it is that makes you excited. There are books about everything. Everything you can think of. You know, if you only like sports, I mean, hello. There are a million books about sports. If you only like, I don't know, knitting. A million books about knitting. If you like to cook, everything. And I don't mean just cookbooks. They got books about cooking and history of cooking and different types of cuisine and all kinds of things. We need to exercise, you know, the things that will expand our minds. But, you know, I just can't ignore that we were a people that were denied information for so long. And then bringing it to today, you have places that are literally rewriting history. Literally rewriting history. So you need to know that history. You need to know the truth because it's changing every day. You're not going to get it in school. Even before they started doing this little erasure, it's been happening forever. So I'm just saying that as black people, as brown people, we can't afford not to read. We just can't.
Reading hits different than listening and watching videos. It hits a different part of your brain. And it is important for us to stimulate as much of our brains as possible, because as black folks, we's in trouble, we's in danger, and we've been in danger, and we need our brains to be able to figure out, especially our young people, because shit, I'm 55. But our young people, we need to stimulate and develop their brains on all levels. We need to lead the way in that effort. We need to lead by example. I was listening to a video the other day that was talking about the period of Reconstruction. After our formal enslavement ended, there was some progress. A lot of us got elected to public office, and then there was a period of Reconstruction or whatever. But there was also a movement by the daughters of the Confederacy, or the moms or the sisters or the women. I knew the statues that still stand to this day were initiated during that time in history. I didn't know that there was a tradition in that time of banning books and reviewing everything in the curriculum. They had committees that would review curriculums nationwide, and anything in the curriculum that did not support the version of history that they wanted to advance their narrative would be contested and probably banned, because no one else was fighting against that. We know this is not the first wave of that type of behavior. As long as we're in a global system of white supremacy, it's not going to be the last wave. The system is always trying to control the narrative and always trying to control us. Even as we were talking, it reminded me of one of the women in UP when we did the reading committee. It mentioned we should do little libraries around town. And so our conversation made me want to revisit that, and also revisit maybe trying to find some people to develop a system to do some read aloud with some children, to get some book donations going, and maybe develop some sort of library and engagement system here. I'm an opt-out person, and so even though I do think that everybody should have a library card because it supports the library, even if you're not going to use it, but you probably should use it because there are, as you said, so many resources there. But I'm an opt-out person because the foundation of the system is built on some mess and confusion. So you can't really You have to create your own system that's built on righteousness and justice and truth and God and good. We constantly trying to shift an apple into an orange. It's not going to happen. We just need to go on and get with the oranges and the pineapples and the coconuts and the
Right.
bananas. I want to invite the listeners, invite us to think about small efforts and individual efforts and
Community.
collective efforts, more importantly,
Community
to
effort.
increase and support literacy, to foster in young people and in older people, and support our love of reading and books and storytelling and building community.
You know, something you said made me think, in looking for ways to promote my books. I saw a couple of authors put their books in the, the little libraries, the free little libraries, like you were just talking about. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. It ain't libraries in my neighborhood at all. Very interesting, this again about access. Okay, why in the hell are there no little free libraries? Do we need to get somebody to build the little cute things and start putting books around our neighborhoods? Because why would we not have these in our neighborhoods? Like, they're in other neighborhoods in DC, let me tell you. There are. But I'm from Ward 7, for people who know what that means, and bought a house and raised my children in Ward 8. We're east of the river, which those are the two poorest wards in DC. And they're also all black. Well, they ain't all black no more. But historically, it's also the most beautiful area too. So there's that. Anyway, I've never seen a little free library. And so you saying that, it's so hard to do anything remotely. I'm wondering who I can talk to about maybe getting that project off the ground. I got some people. Let me you go ahead.
Get on that, and everybody
Yeah.
else too. And the other thing is I don't know if you noticed, but the hotel. Are you doing your self-love event at Mio Tricasa?
Yeah.
I love that New Nefer Roche has books out. And so many people, Iapo's book is out. And we have had many people talk to us and say, oh, we saw the book there, and talk about that. One woman was leaving town and she reached out to me and had books, and I took them and donated them to New Nefer Roche, because it seems like she has some kind of library system starting, maybe, but it's something to build off of.
Right. It's something else we can talk offline, but I just want to say it to give other people ideas. So, the way we don't see libraries in our area here, I noticed there's a big, pretty bus stop that they built coming out of Puerto. And in that bus stop, there are books. There are books on the shelf. I was like, oh, we should build our little free libraries and stake them at the bus stops. Yes.
That idea.
Could do the same thing in urban areas in the States. It's a little harder in the States because you're dealing with cement sidewalks. So we've got to figure out how to post those. But even still, it can be done. Yeah, it can be. The last thing that I want to talk about is, as writers, as Black people, but definitely as writers, we have a responsibility. We're writing books, poems, plays, whatever it is you're writing. We have a stake in the literacy of our readers, a stake in the literacy of our communities, and to really be conscious of that and get involved to increase that literacy and increase that literacy rate. It could be starting a book club. It could be getting little free libraries in our communities. It could be talking to the library if you have one in your community. The librarians there probably have ideas, and that is part of their goal as well. So partnering with our libraries to say, how can we do this? What can we do to help our communities become more literate?
Not only do we have a responsibility to support the development and to encourage literacy and reading, as writers, as creators, as black people, we have a responsibility to, and you know, I love, but we have a responsibility in our work to show us ourselves, to help us love ourselves more. It's important as much as we can to be responsible in our work. So, for example, as rappers, when I was younger, of course, the industry has shifted. When it started, it wasn't an industry, it was a creative outlet, and there was a lot of love and political activism in that work. And now it's controlled by other people to push their agenda. As independent writers, we understanding that we're in a system and in a context where there's so much pulling us down, pulling us down, pulling us down, pulling us down, that we can't afford to play around. We have to be about lifting us up, lifting us up, lifting
Right.
us up.
Right.
And I know we want to be free as creatives, some of us, and we just want to be creatives instead of black creatives. But our responsibility to our community, that's an important part of it.
And to piggyback on that, I want to give credit where credit is due. There are a lot of rappers who could have been much more known than they are, but they made a decision to do their art the way they wanted to, write and give the messages that they wanted to give. Support those artists who are putting some good stuff in our brains. So I'm not saying I'm not enjoying the party anthems and stuff like that, and especially back in my day, I was a rap head. But I am saying it is some of this mess out here that I'm not going to listen to because it's a mess. I mean, I'm going to be real.
We're people. We come from people. We love life. Partying is a part of life. It's nothing wrong with partying to me. It's nothing wrong with. I don't think everything has to be. Oh, this must be a lesson. But some stuff is just some bull. That's
Yeah.
how I feel.
Yeah.
So
That's
I feel
what
like
said. It's a mess out here.
it's
definitely-
designed to. It's just messing us up, and that's the design. So
Whatever you can do in your little corner of the world to promote literacy in your community and with young people and within your family, do it on an individual level. Let's band together and do it.
yeah, I agree.
Be
I
creative.
agree.
Let's get it done.
Let's get it done. Let's keep doing what we're doing and be willing to step up and do more. I want to go back to this little free library thing. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a partnership with Avalon Village and do something related to literacy, because they have the homework house there in Highland Park.
Yeah.
Don't you know, like, I want to, yeah, so I want to do something at home and something at home, because I have a dual home. 'Cause I grew up, like I said, in Highland Park, so that's right in Highland Park.
Yeah.
So go out, write, and also support your community however you can, because
Yeah.
we need it.
We
We
need it.
deserve it.
We do.
And reading, for some of us, I don't want to say it's the joy of my life, but it's a joy. That's black joy.
It is for me. Books and words. Yeah. That's my joy. It is.
Word pictures. So that's it for this episode of Writing While Black. Thank you so much for joining us. Season 2 is continuing on, and Season 1 is available on Spotify and YouTube. Right on. Right on. Peace.
Reading, learning, writing, creating, what good is living, thinking, healing, loving, living, doing, writing while black, black, black.